Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Richard Stevenson and I'm the Director of Stevenson Dental Solutions in San Dimas, California. And today we're going to talk about the MOD Ceramic Onlay on tooth number 3 on the Acadental typodont. Before we get into the prep, let's do a little sketching so you can see the proposed plan. There's a lot of confusion, I think, about onlays, and rightly so, because I don't think it's very clearly taught in most dental schools, and it's worth going over this a little bit. So you can see that we've got 3 planes of reduction on the occlusal, the A, B, and C plane, and then some boxes here in green. Now I'm showing you a shoulder on the functional cusp side. So the outline form of the reduction would look something like this on both teeth. And notice that the functional cusp is in a different location on the upper and lower teeth, of course. So you'd have the classic MOD ceramic onlay with this type of design. And in research that I performed with one of my grad students, we showed that this design was superior to the flat design, the V-shaped design that has been popularized recently. So we like this functional cusp anatomic wraparound, or better to call it a cap. And sometimes we'll even want to put it on the non-functional cusp in the case where we have some weakened enamel, or perhaps a tooth has been endodontically treated and is significantly compromised structurally. It's kind of nice to maybe wrap over there as well. All right, so we're going to do more of the classic design here on tooth number 3 on the Acadental typodont. And the entire video has been sped up because this is a fairly long video. It's 21 minutes long, and I'd like to show you this preparation without having it drag on too long. So the outline form starts with a 330 burr, and this is used for depth cut, and we take this to the full depth of the flutes, so that's 1.5 millimeters. And now we can utilize a burr like a KS1, which is about 1.2 millimeters in diameter. And we can use this burr like it was a 57 burr or something, and tip the burr to create the amount of draw or the amount of taper on all of those walls. Some people say, well, why not just use a tapered burr? You certainly can. In fact, there are many burrs made by Brasseler that would fit that particular need. I actually like doing that with a burr called an 845 or even an 846. And then of course there are the Robert Winter burrs, which are phenomenal, and they all can accomplish the end result. This KS burr is very rounded on its end and will give you a very soft, round internal line angle, and so for that reason it's really quite desirable. So you can see that we have draw and taper, if you will. You can see the walls of the facial are easily visible, and it's really important to understand that most teeth are about 6 millimeters from cusp tip to cusp tip, whether they're premolar or molar. And people often talk about the importance of keeping a certain preparation 1/2 or 1/3 of that intercuspal distance, and that distance is the same on every tooth. So 1/2 of that distance would be 3 millimeters, 1/3 of that distance would be 2 millimeters. The thing that makes the molars and the premolars different is what's beyond those cusp tips, making the molars much bigger looking. Of course, they are bigger, but not on the occlusal table. So we're going to look at approximately 1/3 of the intercuspal distance for the size of this particular occlusal portion. We're just using the same KS1 burr. You could use a KS0. Also, it's a little more narrow if you want something that's a little easier to maybe fit into the preparation. This can be accomplished with the high speed or with the electric handpiece. Either way, I prefer electric in my practice, but in my teaching center we use the air turbine handpieces. I'm going to use a 169L burr just to make a little slit down the proximal. You could also use many different burrs for this, maybe a 55 or a 56. Some people might want to use a diamond burr for this purpose to get down into that box, or even something like a 245 carbide. It doesn't really matter. The key is that you keep it rather conservative, about the width of the isthmus, and keep it as like a little slit. And in so doing, you can minimize how deep you go axially. It'd be nice to keep the axial depth right around 1 millimeter. I suppose you could be a little bit more, maybe up to 1.5, but about 1 millimeter is all that's really required in the interproximal axial depth area. Now I want to make sure you understand axial depth is different than gingival extension. Gingival extension is how far you push the burr towards the gingiva, where axial depth is how far you push the burr in towards the center of the tooth. And sometimes that's misunderstood. So we're just continuing here. Now I am using the 𝐥𝐤𝐤, which is only 1 millimeter in diameter. And once again, it's round-ended and it's parallel. So all of the draw that I'm achieving is being created by me tipping the handpiece, and I'm not relying on the handpiece, the burr, to create that. One of the most important things you can do is to lean the burr towards itself, towards the center. So, the mesial box, you want to lean the burr on the axial wall towards the middle of the tooth, towards the distal. And on the distal box, you want to lead the burr towards the mesial. People have often criticized me for using hand instruments in aesthetic dentistry, but I think that they're essential. I think you can be really conservative. This is just a large hatchet that's being used to break off that little shell and give us an opportunity to be very conservative. This hand instrument right here is called the off-angle chisel, and this is a mesial off-angle chisel, and then the other one would be the distal off-angle chisel. So the 44S and the 45S, both of these instruments are 1 millimeter wide. So while you're chipping away this undermined enamel, this bird beak and this little lip down there at the gingival, you can use this instrument to chip and measure at the same time. Kind of cool. And sometimes little pieces of this tooth will get sort of wedged in there, and you just have to flick them out. You notice that I'm starting with the inlay, and I think it's because that's how I was taught by Dr. Warren Johnson and Richard Tucker to do gold inlay preparations, because you can sometimes be really conservative. When you start with the inlay, you may only have to onlay one small area of the tooth, or maybe you don't have to onlay anything. So I like to start that way on teeth where I'm not sure I'm going to need to onlay or not. I'm just using a really small needle-shaped burr. This is a 8850-012 to help me to straighten up the walls interproximally and not hit the adjacent tooth in the process. We're not flaring these walls, we're just trying to get a little bit of extension. The extensions on a ceramic onlay could be as little as an amalgam, but typically they're more because you are presumably replacing an amalgam or a failing composite restoration. Most schools that are going to ask you to perform an onlay like this are going to request that you keep the gingival walls 0.5 to 1 millimeter supergingival. And this is an 847 KR016, very classic recommended burr for ceramic onlays, and I could have used this for the occlusal in the boxes, but I'm just using it here for the occlusal reduction because we're going to do an MOD onlay where we onlay both the non-functional and the functional cusps. And we want to make sure that we have somewhere between 1.5 and 2 millimeters. You know, the back end of a burr is 1.6, so you can always use the back part of any burr that fits in the friction grip handpiece as a measuring device for you. So we're going to look for 1.5 to 2 millimeters here. The assumption is that this is going to be for a lithium disilicate restoration, like e.max. You know, when you're finished prepping that facial, it should still look like a tooth. You shouldn't prep it flat and make it unsightly. It should sort of flow with the morphology and the anatomy of the teeth, mesial and distal to it. So here we are prepping the B plane and making a little depth cut in the area of the groove, and then we're going to now switch over to the functional cusp bevel, and we're going to hold the handpiece so that it's angled similarly to the first plane that we cut on the non-functional cusp. So we're going to, right here, whatever angle we use for that is matching the angle of the teeth adjacent in its original form also. And then we're going to use that same angle to go ahead and take away the same amount, 1.5 to 2 millimeters of tooth structure here. And we're using a depth cut technique that occurs rather quickly. You're basically making a small depth cut as you progress, and it sort of looks like more like a plane. And we can also use this burr to finesse the taper of the walls at this point and make sure that everything has got enough bulk. It is sharpening up the line angle that we had kind of had more rounded, so we're going to have to revisit these areas a little bit. It may not seem entirely efficient to you, but I think that once you see the final product, you'll understand that the steps we took made sense, and we let this preparation evolve based on the needs of the tooth while it's in function. Maintaining the taper of the occlusal at all times is really important. The boxes aren't quite having enough draw yet, so we're going to work on them with the 𝐾S0F. The 𝐾S0F is 1 millimeter, and it is straight. It's got a round end to it, so it's not going to make sharp internal line angles. And even though we use hand instruments, we never want to have the hand instruments create a sharp internal line angle. So these hand instruments are not used for anything other than just to knock away a little bit of undermined enamel or a bird beak or a J-shaped margin or something like that. You notice how I created these little ditches down on the gingival, and I found this to work well for all class 2s, whether they be composites, amalgams, or gold or even inlays, is to create a little bit of undermining in the enamel and then just chip it away. It's a kind of a cool little technique. You undermine and chip the gingival, and it works better in the mouth, but it actually works pretty well with typing on teeth as well. So it's sort of a ditch that can be created, and then the little undermined portion next to the gingival can just be flicked off pretty easily. It's a great way to make an extension without hitting the adjacent tooth. And if we need to do a little bit more, we can just simply make another ditch and go a little further if we need to extend the boxes further gingivally. In our dental lab in Burbank, California, my technicians and I frequently see preparations for onlays that don't have adequate taper in the boxes. So I think it's really important that as dentists we work really hard to make sure that we have adequate draw, adequate taper. Otherwise, it just makes it so difficult to make a well-fitting restoration. So take your time, and our fee for these procedures are pretty high, and I think that spending an hour on a single preparation like this is completely justified for your dental office, and I think the patient's well-being is being respected. Perhaps I'm not the fastest operator, but I think that spending some time getting the details right are really good payoffs, and it's fun. And now we're just putting that shoulder on the functional cusp, and we place this about the same level of the pulpal wall in a vertical sort of dimension. We're placing the same location, and this is going to be approximately 1 millimeter deep axially, and the burr we're using here is the 8847-016, and it does a pretty nice job of creating the proper depth. Some people will not do this and have it beveled, and I think that is a potentially dangerous thing to do because the material gets very thin, and it can be done, but it needs to be handled very carefully. Other people will flatten out that entire lingual cusp and aggressively take away a lot of it, and that can work too, but once again, if you don't have to take it away, why should you? So at this point, it almost looks like a gold preparation that hasn't been beveled yet. You know, everything's way too sharp. They look kind of cool, but they're not going to work really well. And when it comes to milling these procedures and fabricating well-fitting lithium disilicate restorations, so we are definitely going to want to spend some time rounding off everything, and we will do that in the upcoming segment of this very long little video. So bear with me. So here we are with the KS0F, and we can just use this to smooth off the scratches and maybe start to do a little bit of the softening between the planes, you know, between this plane we're working on now. I refer to this as the C plane. I know some people call it the A plane. I refer to the functional cusp bevel as the A plane, but right here, that would be my A plane, and because I call it the A plane because I think it's the most important, and we reduce that so that we have adequate space for function. And now we are just utilizing the same KS0F to soften all of those sharp transitions between the vertical wall of the isthmus and the cusps. And it takes some time, but it's well worth it. You can see I'm just rolling it over the axiopulpal there to create some rounding there as well. You know, I initially thought that ceramic preparations were so easy compared to gold preparations, but I actually think that they have their own challenges, and they're probably both equally challenging to do really well, and they take time. Will I do a ceramic onlay in a case where I'm doing a root canal? Absolutely. Ceramic onlays, I think, have come so far, and when they're bonded and performed well, I think that they can reinforce the tooth adequately to support a tooth that has received a root canal procedure. And I think that would hold up well in the not only in the literature, but also if you were ever in a peer review situation. And this is a small carbide you could use called a 7102, and you can use it on high speed or low speed, and it's kind of nice because it can get into hard to reach areas. We're almost done. We only have less than 3 minutes here to finish, and I promise this will go quick. And you can see that we can tip this burr and get it into some of the hard to reach areas, and it's kind of fun to use. I love this little guy. I use it for doing anatomy on composites and for getting access to anywhere where I need a little nice, sharp, precise edge to reach into a hard to reach area. And if you see any little undermined areas, you can just flick those off with a hand instrument of your choice. You can even use it sideways like this to remove any little loose enamel rods that might be hard to remove from the occlusal. You can sort of slide them underneath this way. It's really kind of a cool little piece of information that mentors taught me years ago in clinical situations. We don't want the exit angles to be flared, but the material can handle a less than 90-degree exit. It can be a little bit more obtuse. You can see that we've got a nice even clearance with the occlusion, and then coming in now with a little bit of a slow speed and a large finishing diamond called an 8881-012, 8881-012, and it just works so well to sort of soften everything and give you that last final look to things. So to review, 1 millimeter depth axially on the boxes. The clearance, you just need to break contact anywhere from a little bit to maybe up to a millimeter, and then we want to have 1.5 to 2 millimeters of occlusal clearance and try to follow the cusp inclines of the opposing, and that is our MOD Onlay for tooth number 3 Acadental. Certainly not the ideal prep, but it's going to work okay, I think, and we'll show you some photos here of the procedure as it's finished. So I want to thank you for spending way too much time, but I appreciate your patience in watching this entire video. If you're taking a test someplace, I wish you the very best and hope that someday I get to meet you if I have not met you already, and take care. Thank you so much.